They say the sharpest knife is the one that comes from behind, when you never expect it, when you trust the hand that wields it. Betrayal doesn't hurt because it's cruel. It hurts because it comes from the ones you love the most. My name is Daniel, and for years, I thought family meant protection, loyalty, and love. I believed that the people closest to me would be the last ones to wound me. But life has a twisted sense of humor, because the knife that cut deepest into my heart was held not by a stranger, but by my own uncle, the man I admired, respected, and loved like a second father. And worst of all, he didn't just betray me, he stole the woman I trusted with my soul, my wife, Emily. For a long time, I carried this story like a weight chained to my chest, but today I want to tell it all, not because it still hurts, but because I want people to understand how revenge, when served cold, can be the sweetest medicine for a shattered heart. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was 28 when I married Emily. We had been together since college, and to me, she was everything. The kind of woman you dream about, beautiful, smart, and so full of life that she could walk into any room and instantly make it brighter. I was just an ordinary guy with a steady IT job, but she made me feel extraordinary, like I mattered, like I was enough. For the first 2 years, marriage was everything I wanted. We lived in a small but cozy house, spent weekends watching movies, cooking together, and dreaming about the children we would one day raise. If you had asked me then, I would have sworn on my life that nothing could ever come between us. But I was wrong. My Uncle Richard was a man I had looked up to since childhood. He was charming, confident, the kind of man who could command a room without saying much. He was also wealthy, with a nice house, a successful business, and a wife, Clara, who seemed devoted to him. Growing up, he had been my role model, the man I aspired to be. When I introduced him to Emily at a family gathering, I thought nothing of it. Why would I? He was my uncle, my blood. But looking back now, I realize that was the moment everything started to unravel. At first, it was subtle. Richard would compliment Emily in ways that made me slightly uncomfortable. "You look stunning tonight, Emily," he would say, holding her gaze a second too long, or he'd laugh a little too heartily at her jokes, lean in just a little too close when they spoke. I noticed, but I brushed it off. That was just Richard. He had that natural charisma, and I told myself not to be paranoid. Emily, after all, was my wife. She loved me, or so I believed. The real cracks started showing about a year into our marriage. Emily began dressing up more whenever we were heading to family dinners at Richard's house. She would spend extra time on her makeup, pick out her best dresses, and always ask me how she looked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. I thought she just wanted to make a good impression on the family. But soon, it wasn't just family dinners. Emily suddenly became busy more often. She claimed she was working late on freelance projects or going out with friends I'd never met. Her phone, once casually left on the table, was now glued to her hand. She smiled at messages, guarded her screen like it held state secrets, and brushed me off whenever I asked questions. My gut told me something was wrong, but my heart didn't want to believe it. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily had gone to take a shower, leaving her phone on the couch. A notification buzzed, and I glanced at it without meaning to. What I saw made my blood run cold. The name on the screen was R. The message said, "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Last night was amazing." My hands trembled as I unlocked the phone, praying I was misunderstanding. But the moment I opened the messages, my worst nightmare became reality. There they were, dozens, no, hundreds of texts between Emily and Richard. My uncle, my own blood. They talked about secret meetings, shared intimate jokes, exchanged photos I couldn't bear to look at. The betrayal leapt off the screen and tore through my chest like a blade. My vision blurred, my heart pounded, and for a moment I thought I might actually pass out. My wife, my uncle, together, laughing at me, deceiving me, destroying me behind my back. I heard the shower running upstairs, the sound of the water masking the sound of my world falling apart. I put the phone down, sat there in silence, and felt everything I had built crumble to dust. When Emily came downstairs, smiling like nothing was wrong, wrapping a towel around herself, and kissing me on the cheek, I almost lost it. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw everything I had just seen in her face, but I didn't. In that moment, I made a choice that would define the rest of my life. I would not explode. I would not show my hand. If she and Richard wanted to play this game, I would play it better. I would smile. I would act like the devoted husband, and I would gather every ounce of evidence I needed. And when the time was right, I would make them pay. The days that followed were torture. Every time Emily smiled at her phone, every time she claimed she was going to the gym or meeting a friend, I knew exactly where she was going. I installed a location tracker on her phone. She had once shared her location with me and forgotten about it, so it was still active. Every time she lied, I checked. She wasn't at the gym, she wasn't with friends, she was at Richard's house or worse, at cheap hotels downtown. The rage inside me burned hotter with every lie, but so did my resolve. I started documenting everything, screenshots of texts, call logs, locations, receipts she carelessly left behind. Piece by piece, I built a mountain of proof that would one day bury them both. But revenge isn't just about evidence, it's about strategy. And that's when I realized something. Richard had taken from me the one person I loved most, the one person I thought would never betray me. But Richard also had someone, his wife, Clara. Clara was kind, soft-spoken, and clearly lonely. She loved her husband, but he barely gave her the time of day. I had seen it countless times at family dinners, the way she looked at him, craving his attention, and the way he brushed her off like she was an afterthought. That was when it hit me. If Richard thought he could humiliate me, I would humiliate him in return. I would take the one thing he thought was untouchable: his wife. At first, it wasn't intentional. I simply started talking to Clara more. I asked about her hobbies, her interests, her feelings. She opened up to me in ways I don't think she had opened up to anyone in years. She told me how distant Richard had become, how he spent more time away from home, how she felt invisible in her own marriage. I listened. I comforted her. And slowly, I became the shoulder she leaned on. Soon, our conversations grew longer, our laughter more frequent, and I began to notice something in her eyes. A spark, a warmth, something that hadn't been there before. And as much as I told myself this was just part of my plan, part of my revenge, I couldn't deny that I was beginning to feel something too. She was genuine, kind, everything Richard didn't deserve. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how easy it would be to take her from him, not just physically, but emotionally. To make her fall for me the way Emily had once fallen for him. That was the foundation of my revenge. To build something right under Richard's nose, to take what he thought was his forever, and to let him watch it slip through his fingers. I knew the day would come when the tables would turn, when the pain he had given me would come crashing back onto him tenfold. And when that day came, he wouldn't just lose his mistress. He would lose his wife, his pride, and the very image of himself he had built for years. I was patient. I was cold. I was calculating. And little by little, Clara was falling right into my hands. Revenge is not taken in a single day. It's crafted like a masterpiece, carved slowly, painted with patience, and delivered when the enemy least expects it. As I grew closer to Clara, my Uncle Richard remained blind, consumed with his affair with Emily, convinced of his own cleverness, never once imagining that someone could outsmart him. That arrogance would become his downfall. Clara was not difficult to reach. She had been emotionally abandoned for years. Richard treated her like furniture in his grand house, present but invisible, silent but expected to stay in place. So when I showed her the smallest kindness, when I listened to her thoughts, when I remembered her favorite books or the way she liked her coffee, she bloomed. It wasn't manipulation. It was simply giving her what she had always deserved but never received. But I reminded myself constantly, this wasn't about love. This was about justice. This was about making Richard feel the sting of betrayal so deep that he could never recover. Clara's affection grew quickly. At first, she texted me about casual things, asking how my day was or sharing a photo of a recipe she had tried. Then the texts turned longer, more intimate. Her worries, her dreams, her fears. She told me how lonely she felt in that big house, how she sometimes cried herself to sleep while Richard was working late. I didn't have to tell her where he really was. She knew deep down, but denial is a powerful drug. I just had to be there, the steady presence in the storm. The more she leaned on me, the more I became a part of her daily life. Soon she was, calling me late at night just to hear my voice, laughing at my jokes, telling me things she said she had never told anyone else. And that's when I knew. She was already mine. The transformation was slow but undeniable. She started dressing up more, smiling more, glowing with a happiness she hadn't shown in years. Richard didn't notice. How could he? He was too busy stealing my wife. But every time I saw Clara's light returning, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Not because I was stealing her, but because Richard's neglect was the very weapon I would use to destroy him. Meanwhile, Emily continued her charade, acting like the dutiful wife at home while sneaking around with Richard whenever she thought I wasn't looking. But I knew. I tracked. I documented. And every fake smile she gave me was just fuel for the fire of my revenge. The plan came to me like lightning one sleepless night. If Richard had no problem flaunting his betrayal behind my back, then I would make sure his betrayal was thrown in his face. Not quietly, not secretly, but so openly, so powerfully, that it would shatter the arrogant mask he wore. I didn't want whispers or suspicions. I wanted him to see with his own eyes that the one woman he thought would always be his wife, had chosen me instead. So I set the stage. Slowly, carefully. I suggested to Clara that she deserved more. That she didn't have to spend her life waiting for scraps of affection from a man who no longer cared. She resisted at first, loyal despite her pain. But as the weeks passed, as Richard's lies grew bolder, she began to see the truth. And then came the breaking point. One evening, Clara showed up at my door, her eyes red from crying. She had found a receipt in Richard's jacket pocket, 2 glasses of wine, a dinner for 2, at a place he had once taken her on their anniversary, except this time it wasn't with her. She knew. She didn't say it out loud, but the pain in her eyes told me everything. That night, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing, broken. And that was when I whispered, "You don't deserve this, Clara. You deserve to be loved the way you've always dreamed of." And for the first time, she looked at me not as Richard's nephew, but as the man who saw her, who valued her. From that moment, there was no going back. Our bond deepened, and I could feel the revenge aligning perfectly into place. But I still needed the right moment, the perfect storm to unleash it all. And then it arrived, a family gathering. Richard, in his arrogance, invited everyone to his house, siblings, cousins, relatives. Emily, of course, insisted we attend, smiling as though she wasn't betraying me every single day. Clara, on the other hand, was unusually quiet, her eyes darting to mine whenever no one was looking. I knew she was nervous, but I reassured her. Tonight was the night. The house was buzzing with chatter, glasses clinking, laughter filling the air. Richard strutted around like a king, Emily by his side far too often for comfort, though most of the family didn't notice, or pretended not to. My blood boiled every time I saw them exchange glances, but I forced myself to stay calm. My moment was coming. As dinner was served, Richard raised a toast, bragging about his business, his house, his perfect life. His voice oozed pride, arrogance dripping from every word. And that's when I decided it was time. I stood up, my glass in hand, and smiled. "I'd like to make a toast too," I said, my voice steady. Everyone turned to me, curious. Richard smirked, clearly enjoying the attention. "To family," I began. "To loyalty, to trust, to the bonds that are never supposed to break. But sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who stab us in the back." The room went silent. Richard's smirk faltered. Emily's eyes widened. Clara stared at me, her hand trembling on her glass. And then I said it. "My wife and my uncle thought they could betray me and get away with it. But tonight, I want everyone to see what betrayal really looks like." Gasps filled the room as I pulled out my phone and connected it to the TV in Richard's living room. And there, on the massive screen, I played the videos and photos I had collected, proof of Emily and Richard together, laughing, embracing, sneaking into hotels. The room erupted. Relatives shouted. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others stared at Richard in disgust. Emily tried to grab the phone, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable. Richard's face turned pale, his arrogance crumbling as whispers filled the air. How could he? With his own nephew's wife. Disgusting. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. As Richard stood there, frozen in humiliation, I turned to Clara. I took her hand, right there in front of everyone, and kissed it gently. Gasps echoed again, louder this time. Richard's eyes went wild, his mouth opening, but no words coming out. "You see, Richard," I said, my voice calm but cutting like a blade. "Betrayal cuts both ways. You took my wife, so I took yours. And unlike Emily, Clara didn't fall for lies. She fell for truth." Clara, her cheeks flushed but her eyes blazing with strength, nodded. "I'm done with you, Richard," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done being invisible. I deserve better, and I've found it." Richard stumbled back as if the words had struck him harder than any punch. His kingdom, his pride, his carefully constructed image, shattered in front of the very family he had always tried to impress. Emily burst into tears, begging me to forgive her, but her words meant nothing. I turned to her, cold as ice. "You made your choice. Now live with it." The family dinner ended in chaos. Richard tried to yell, tried to salvage his reputation, but the damage was done. Clara walked out with me, her head held high, while the rest of the family turned their backs on him and Emily. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Sweet, unshakable peace. Revenge hadn't just leveled the playing field, it had restored my dignity, my power, my sense of self. Richard thought he could betray me and walk away unscathed. Instead, he lost everything. His wife, his pride, his family's respect. And I walked away not broken, but stronger than ever. People say revenge is poison, that it destroys the one who seeks it. But I don't agree. Revenge, when earned, when executed with patience and precision, is justice. And justice is never poison. It's freedom.